So first off, the rematch between Conquest and Mark happened way sooner than I think most people were expecting. The episode works incredibly well as both a superhero battle and a family tragedy. But more importantly, it's one of the clearest examples of why show don't tell is such an insanely powerful storytelling tool. I don't want to drag this intro out forever, so let's get straight into the rematch itself. Compared to the original confrontation, the second fight is shorter, but it's somehow even more aggressive and exhausting. One of my favorite choices they made was simply letting both of them stop talking and just throw hands. Conquest's trash talk during this fight was iconic and added so much personality, but I'm glad they didn't recycle that approach here because this encounter feels fundamentally different. There's no adjustment period anymore. Last time, Mark had to study Conquest in real time, figuring out how to hurt him before Earth paid the price. Conquest was also learning exactly how to mentally shatter Mark and provoke him into fighting harder. This time, there's no discovery phase. Outside of Mark's opening punch, nearly every hit afterward targets Conquest's head because Mark remembers that being the only thing that nearly worked before. Nobody outright says these two understand each other now, but the fight silently communicates it through their actions. That alone makes the battle feel even more hopeless. Part of what makes the original Conquest fight so unforgettable was how impossible victory seemed. Mark gets brutalized over and over again until Conquest's own arrogance becomes his downfall. In my earlier videos, I mentioned how Conquest keeps Mark emotionally invested by threatening the people he loves. The second Oliver appears, Conquest instantly shifts focus towards him for the same reason. Because Conquest isn't here for conquest anymore, he's here because he enjoys the violence itself. The permanent grin plastered across his face tells us everything. If Invincible handled this poorly, Conquest would constantly spell out exactly how he manipulates Mark. Instead, the dialogue works more like psychological needling. Whether he talks about testing Eve's blood again or says Oliver shouldn't miss the fun, the writing trusts the audience enough not to over-explain. The best part is that he rarely even says people's names. The show assumes you're smart enough to know who he means. It's subtle, but it also reinforces how little humanity Conquest sees in the people he murders. But you might be wondering why I keep talking about silence being poetic while discussing dialogue. That's because the moment the fight truly escalates, the words almost completely disappear. Before things explode into full chaos, Mark delivers one final line: "You were never breathing again." Now sure, that could sound like typical dramatic dialogue, but what makes it land is how vague it is. Does he literally mean strangling him to death? Or is he promising that Conquest dies here no matter what? Brilliance is that the answer slowly becomes truth. The show never pauses to explain this. You understand it through body language, expressions, and raw physicality. Even without the dialogue, it's obvious Mark has reached the same level of fury he had during their first fight. And because he's crushing Conquest's throat the entire time, Conquest physically can't taunt him properly anymore. Mark learned that the talking distracted him before, so now he refuses to allow it. What's fascinating is how opposite the mental states are. Mark is completely locked in, refusing to let go under any circumstance. Meanwhile, Conquest still treats this like entertainment. Even as the blood drains from his face and the situation becomes more dangerous, that smile never fully disappears. It's horrifying because the audience understands one terrifying truth the entire time. If Mark loosens his grip for a second, he dies. And once again, the fight reinforces that Mark isn't actually stronger than Conquest. He's just determined enough to survive him. And survive him, Mark absolutely does not do gracefully. One detail I really love is that outside of the blood from Conquest's thumb, nearly all the blood splattered everywhere belongs to Mark. That's part of what gives this fight such an ugly beauty. Every punch matters, every impact feels painful, and the scene would lose so much power if Mark constantly verbalized his pain out loud. Instead, the show lets him scream, grunt, choke, and growl through it. Each sound sound carries a different level of agony, making the entire thing deeply uncomfortable to sit through. Remember when I said Mark adapted by targeting Conquest's head? The second he realizes words aren't enough to break Mark anymore, he repeats the exact tactic that worked before, violating impaling him through the torso while the soundtrack suddenly cuts dead silent. Whenever Invincible kills the music, it usually means something horrifying is about to happen. The silence becomes louder than the sound itself, just like when Mark brutalized Engstrom or when Conquest was getting smashed apart. The absence of music makes every upcoming noise hit harder. And honestly, I genuinely think Conquest believed he had won in that moment. Right before punching through Mark, his grin grows even wider, almost like he's accepted the outcome and is excited to watch Mark suffer through it. I also think he assumed this injury alone would finally make Mark release him. Instead, we get what might honestly be the single strongest moment in the entire series. Not this scene, not this one, not even that one. This! The moment Mark lets out that horrifying scream while tightening his grip even harder. Earlier in the episode, he promised Eve, Debbie, and Paul he'd survive. Now he's face to face with death. The scene is unbearable in the best way possible. The sound design alone makes it feel deeply personal. Even 1 second of audio tells you everything. That's exactly why the music disappears, to force you into the moment with him. And meanwhile, Conquest remains fascinating because the show leaves room for interpretation. Maybe he starts pulling harder because he realizes Mark won't stop. Maybe he's trying to drag Mark down with him. Maybe he genuinely intends to rip his heart out like he threatened before. The writers intentionally leave space for multiple readings. What matters most is that Mark never lets go. The first time they fought, he couldn't contain Conquest. Cities collapsed, thousands died, everyone close to Mark suffered. So seeing him cling on with absolute refusal here feels like the perfect conclusion to that original failure. And the best part, Conquest's death isn't flashy. No expression, no dramatic decapitation, no massive cinematic finisher, just suffocation. For someone as monstrous as Conquest, it's weirdly small and quiet. And once the fight ends, the silence finally breaks with one desperate cry for help. Because even though Mark technically won, nothing about this feels victorious. Honestly, watch this sequence muted and you'll notice something interesting. The scene still works. The destruction, the expressions, the depression, all of it communicates the emotion without needing dialogue. The audio only amplifies what's already there visually. That's why silence feels poetic in this fight. The characters don't need to explain themselves anymore. We already understand their rage, their fear, and their desperation. Dialogue isn't bad, obviously, but when a scene can emotionally destroy you without constantly telling you how to feel, that's when storytelling becomes something special. If you haven't, please subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to hit 200 subscribers. It'll really go a long way. Thank you.